Hi, Andy McPhee here at F.A. Davis. I want to talk now about permissions for textual content. I'm talking tables, algorithms, certain things that really are just text. We want to get permission and need to get permission for certain pieces of textual content that are owned specifically and clearly by another publisher. Let me give you an example. The ACLS guidelines from the American Heart Association. Those guidelines are specific. They come off a great deal of research. They're well documented. They are the guidelines for ACLS, as far as I know. Let's consider that they are. You can reprint them. You can revise the color, the schematic itself, the boxes. Maybe you're going to make them balloons with red arrows instead of blue arrows, whatever. You can do that, but the clinical content, the clinical meaning of the text, that's what's copyrightable. The same thing with the Glasgow Coma scale and other scales along that line that have been researched, and it's not just the presentation of the content, whether they're bulleted or in a table or whatever. It's the clinical meaning itself, and it's been agreed upon by the community that this is it. This is the content you want. Now, one of the most common mistakes I see beginning authors make is to take or to see a table in a journal and then send that to the publisher for permissions. And I have an example. A table came out of a journal of one of the infectious disease journals, I think. And it was about drugs, anti-infectives, and side effects and interactions and things like that. It was very generic information that could have been presented in any number of ways, and the clinical meaning of which, the clinical content of which, you can gain from any drug book. It's just that in that journal they happen to have a table in which the authors presented it in a certain way. That's not something we want permissions for. Because if the authors can provide content that's not specific clinically to another publication, why pay $200, $300, $400, $500, this particular piece, $750 for permission to use that quite generic table? Why do that? It makes no sense from the publisher's end or from the author's end. So when you're faced with a table of information that is presented in one way in a book, but it's generic information that you can get from anywhere, now we're talking about, the presentation of that content. And the presentation, well, we don't really care about, because we're going to change that anyway. So now you present that content in the way that makes the most sense for your book. Maybe you include more drugs. You delete drugs that weren't there. You change the headings. You add a column. You certainly change all the text around and make it yours, and provide your own resources for that. And look at other books to make sure everything agrees, that kind of thing. But for clinical content that is generic, revise that table. Don't lean on another publisher's work, another author's work, because really it's just kind of lazy. Save the permissions for the really specific things and do your work for the rest of it. I hope that helps, and thanks very much.